Hi, I'm Jennifer Ries, and this is my research study for Morningside College 701. My research study is whatever I need when a high school homeroom intervention research study to raise student achievement. President Obama released the ESSA, or Every Student Succeed Act, in 2015. It requires that all students be taught at high academic standards that will prepare them to succeed in college and careers. 1/5 of students drop out every year, and the AYP is reporting higher numbers of special education. So it's really important that we are looking at an intervention program that looks at all student success and not just one group of students, such as special ed or low achieving students. My personal why is that I wanted to implement a new intervention program to enhance the student success, and I really wanted to test the validity of this particular WIN intervention. It is clear that intervention is needed. A couple research programs is RTI, which is Response to Intervention, and MTSS, which is Multiple Tier Systems of Support. This study is a version of RTI that will be called WIN, or Whatever I Need, and this WIN time will be used to monitor the student grades and provide students and teachers with that one-on-one contact time in order to have these interventions together. The literature of multi-tiered systems of support is defined framework that many schools use to provide specific targeted support to students that struggle. Where MTSS really focuses on the whole child and the well-being, it focuses on their social, emotional, and their attendance and their behavior. Whereas an RTI program is going to focus more on the special ed students. It's a three-tiered intervention system that uses progress monitoring, assessment, and data in order to get students to those higher levels of success. This RTI was created to keep students out of special ed programs. The theoretical framework is focused on the social cognitive theory from Albert Bandura. It is based on the assumption that people really learn from watching others. Therefore, new behaviors are acquired and can be obtained just by solely watching other people. The goal of an intervention program is to help students with lower success rates obtain higher success rates. And the social cognitive theory states that learners can really acquire these new behaviors by observing. Bandura's social cognitive theory combined with Vygotsky's theory of learning, where he calculates that social learning really is an integral part of the cognitive development. These theories would support the idea that students with low grades observing students with high grades and good study skills will pick them up and learn them through being around each other. Much research was found in the Lit Review for these elementary programs, but none for secondary, which is why my study is so important. Many RTI programs are also really focused on special education students or low achieving students, but not really looking at all students as a whole. The purpose of the study is to determine the impact an RTI intervention program has on these Iowa assessment scores. The hypothesis of this study is that students that do receive this WIN intervention built into their school day will have a higher Iowa assessment score than those students who did not receive the WIN intervention time. The dependent variable is the student assessment scores on the Iowa assessments in reading, math, science, and composite, and the independent variable is the WIN intervention time period. The measurement being used is the Iowa assessment scores, and the design is an experimental research design to determine the impact of the RTI. This is a two-group pre-test and post-test design. The results of this study could be used to help other schools make instructional decisions about RTI instruction or any types of interventions that they would like to use. And this study will provide evidence of successful interventions for future people to refer to. The participants in this study were two separate groups of students, and it followed each group from their freshman year to their junior year of high school. The control group consisted of 49 students, and the experimental group consisted of 47 students. Each WIN or intervention group had 20 to 25 students randomly assigned to them and had 2 classroom teachers. The high school graduation rate is 96%, and the student to teacher ratio is 15:1. The materials needed for the study were the Iowa assessment scores, again in reading, math, science, and composite, in order to articulate a pre-test and post-test. WIN list, which is a Google Doc accessed by teachers only in order to see which students need interventions and communicate that. And then access to the online grading program in order to check in with students weekly. The procedure is this was a 30-minute homeroom structured in the middle of the day right before lunch. Students were to report to this WIN intervention, sit down, and get to work. The teachers did have a few managerial tasks. They had to first take attendance and read the WIN list, which articulated communication between all teachers on which students had late work, makeup work, students that needed to maybe report to a particular classroom in order to have some reteaching done because they needed it or they were absent, but also the time frame to make up retakes that could be done and make up labs possibly as well. There were 2 WIN teachers to every homeroom, and 1 day a week each teacher separately would report to a professional team meeting instead of the homeroom WIN time. There were 2 different groups that were used at 2 different times. The first group, which is the control group in 2014, was followed from freshman to junior year. And as freshmen in 2014, they did not receive the intervention. Then as juniors, 2 years later, they did receive the WIN intervention. The second group, which is our experimental group, followed from 2016 all the way through 2018. And this group did receive the intervention time all the way through in 2016, 17, and 18 as freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. The data collected again was the Iowa assessments in reading, math, and science, and the averages and means were determined. The t-tests in reading, science, and composite do not show a significant difference in achievement between the control group and the experimental group. The t-test results when comparing the math pre-test and post-test, they do show a significant or a large negative t-value being reported. So the hypothesis at this point with math really was null and void, and no post-analysis needed to be conducted. This figure shows the pre-test Iowa assessment between the control group and the experimental group. And as we take a look at this, the blue and the orange, the blue is the control and the orange is the experimental, we really see a straight line across. So there was not a significant difference in these post-test scores. On average, the control group post-test score was only 2 points lower than the experimental group. In math and in science, it was only 5 points lower. So I'm going to move on to the post-test, which is really the bigger focus to see if there was that comparison. And you'll again in these post-test scores going to see reading, math, and science means almost identical. There's only 2 or 3 points between reading. Science was 5 points, and their composite score, the control group's composite post-test score was 19 points lower than the experimental group's post-test score, which is not a significant difference in achievement in order to show a large growth by implementing this WIN time intervention. The hypothesis shows that this is the first RTI program of its type that tried to investigate the secondary program in order to achieve and increase student achievement. It was hypothesized that the 30-minute intervention time surrounded by peers would really have a greater or higher assessment scores, but these results did not confirm the hypothesis. They almost had equal scores between the experimental and control group on these post-tests, which really for student learning means that these 30 minutes every day was not needed to enhance their academic success. The paired peer learning by topping really could be the key contributor or the missing link in this study. Topping found that through educational psychology, an integrated theoretical model of paired peer learning that addressed social and emotional needs and gains of students really involved people to similar grouping like who are not professional teachers to really help each other learn and also in turn are learning themselves. He found that this paired peer learning can lead to learning improvement. The social and cognitive theory by Bandera that students learn better through watching others and learn from their social environment. This study did not support that theory. This current study found that this 30-minute intervention surrounded by peers and access to teachers did not increase their Iowa assessment scores. And this could be due to a couple of things, such as possibly student grouping or even teacher classroom management. If students were paired with peers outside of this social time, they could be in different activities or sports or clubs, they really could have seen this intervention time as a social period instead of an academic period. And also, teachers manage their classrooms very differently, and the higher structure really could be pertinent to this time period. Some limitations. The length of this intervention really could have been a game changer. This particular study chose 30 minutes in the day and held in the middle of the school day right before the lunch period. This particular study, the managerial tasks took about 10 minutes, which cut the 30 minutes of intervention time really down to 20 minutes that teachers were really able to work with students, and it took away from that instructional time that was happening. There was a study by Gerstein that showed students with persistent learning challenges might need 10 to 30 more repetitions or opportunities to practice their skill in order to increase their skill. The intervention time was increased from 30 minutes to 45 minutes daily in order to enhance or progress one skill. So with this information, I would encourage a future study to increase their intervention period from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Another limitation was the time of day. This particular intervention was in the middle of the school day, right before the lunch period. It's possible that students had been actively working all morning in direct instruction, and they could have seen this as a mental break for themselves in the day, right before lunch, instead of academically working towards more successful things. So my recommendation would be to consider placing this WIN intervention in the morning first thing. There was research done by Epton that showed successful interventions was goal setting, and that was an effective way to change student behavior. This way, students will have had time in the morning to set goals, not only for their day, of course, but then their week, their month, their quarter, their semester, and their year for long-term success. The third limitation is the way that students were grouped into their WIN groups. This was randomly assigned in this study. It did not clearly show significant difference. I think based on what we learned from topping that it's essential that we really think about how we group students into these WIN groups. And according to topping, we really need to group students likely for that paired peer learning. We could group them by GPA, grades, or assessment, but grouping all low scorers together and all high scorers together in order to have successful paired peer learning. The fourth limitation is the teacher supports. A teacher was pulled one day a week to attend professional meetings, and that really takes away from the entire point of this study, which is students and teachers having access time to each other in order to work together to get those supports needed. So I would encourage not pulling teachers away from their classrooms during this period and have the administration provide more online learning modules in order for students to have access to teachers more often. The last limitation is the social emotional learning, often referred to as SEL. This was not taken into consideration at all. The APA, or the American Psychological Association, did a study or a poll on teens, and it showed that they had higher stress levels than adults. And they were often 30% of the time sad or depressed. This study did not measure how students thought or felt at any point in time, and their SEL was not taken into consideration. So a future study would implement any kind of intervention program, would make a difference to organize one day a week in which we focus on their social emotional learning. The APA in 2019 said ways to help teenagers manage their stress was to sleep well, exercise, talk it out, make time for fun and quiet, get outside, write about it, and learn mindfulness. So as in front of you are ways that we could focus on their SEL one day a week in this WIN intervention in order for success. So what does this mean for students? In order for any intervention program to be successful, students really have to have a big picture understanding of why the school is doing this intervention and how it's going to affect them personally. So it would make sense for the school to also organize a week to explain the implications and what this WIN time could mean for students. As far as teachers go, time is always our worst enemy. There's a small student to teacher ratio, so students really need that time. Teachers need to take time 1 day a week out of their class period possibly in order to use that as a reflection reteaching just in their class period to reach all students. And finally, implications for parents. Parents need to have a more vested interest in their students' social and emotional well-being and teach them those skills that the schools clearly just don't have enough time to teach them. Parents can support their learning by having that open full circle communication as well. My final recommendations is continue to strengthen and validate the findings of the studies and the studies of the impact of RTI on all student learning and teacher studies to determine if really these certified teachers will impact the student growth. Thank you.